This is the Overland Track. Located in the rugged mountains of Tasmania's Highlands, this trail runs point to point from Cradle Valley to Lake St Clair. It traverses glacial-carved valleys, ancient forests and wind-swept moors. It's a grueling 6 days on the trail with the option to summit many of Tasmania's special peaks. And in the summer of 2024, I managed to complete this hike. And now, I want to share all the valuable information that I gained from hiking this trail, so that you can be prepared for hiking the Overland Track as well. It's no easy feat, but I think if you're organised and prepared, you can have a fantastic time out on the trail. Feel free to skip ahead to the timestamps below. Otherwise, sit back and relax, and I hope you enjoy my overland hike analysis. The Overland Track runs point to point from Cradle Valley to Lake St Clair in the Tasmanian Highlands of Australia, and is touted as Australia's premier alpine hike. It's 40 miles point to point, and it's recommended to take 6 days to complete. Taking on the optional side hikes and summits, which I strongly recommend, I ended up doing 66.5 miles and a total elevation of 4,620 metres over the 6 days. You need to register for this hike online, which I'd recommend to do early given the demand to hike this trail is so high. Registration costs around 300 Aussie dollars. Getting to the hike is fairly straightforward. Fly into Launceston, the closest major town, spend a night here, then take one of the shuttle buses to the trailhead in Cradle Valley the next morning. They can also pick you up at the end of the hike to take you back to Launceston. Ensure you book these shuttle buses well ahead of time. Once at the trailhead, you'll check in with the rangers and have a quick safety briefing, and then you'll be out on the trail. There's no way to purchase any food whilst on the trail, so make sure you stock up in Launceston before leaving. There's plenty of fresh rainwater tanks at each hut along the trail. The rangers recommend treating this water, though I didn't and I was fine. You have the option to sleep in bunks in the huts whilst hiking, or sleep in your tent in designated camping spots as I did. As I mentioned, there's lots of optional summits to do along the way, which I'll go into more detail in the next chapter. Day 1. Day 1 consists of getting to the start of the trail. You'll have to get a shuttle bus from Launceston to Cradle Valley, and then once you've checked in, you'll get another shuttle bus from Cradle Valley to the start of the trailhead. Once you've got to the start of the trail, you'll be aiming for the Waterfall Valley Huts, which is about 10.7 kilometres away. You also have the option to summit Cradle Mountain, which sits at about 1,500 metres tall and is about 3 kilometres extra onto the day. Cradle Mountain's probably one of the most popular summits to do, and there's lots of day hikers here as well. I'd strongly recommend summiting this mountain, due to its significance along the trail and also the incredible scenes that you'll see at the summit. Other big highlights of day 1 include passing Crater Lake, one of the picturesque lakes at the very start of the hike, and walking across the Alpine Plateau with Bluff looming off in the background. I think day 1 was probably one of the best days for me. There's so many picturesque scenes that you walk through, and I think Cradle Mountain is just such a special summit. The Waterfall Valley Huts are also a great spot to camp, and you might be able to spot a few wombats towards sunset. Day 2 will see you travel from the Waterfall Valley Huts to Lake Windermere, which is about 7.8 kilometres. You can also summit Bluff, which is an extra 10.5 kilometres. I'd highly recommend summiting Bluff. It's a great view at the top, and it is quite a nice climb as well. You do have to backtrack a little bit to get to Bluff, but I think it's well worth it. Make your way back to the Waterfall Valley Huts after summiting Bluff. Then continue on the official trail towards Lake Windermere. This section is relatively flat and less demanding than the previous day. Expect to traverse button grass plains and stunning alpine lakes. There is quite an exposed section between Lake Will and Lake Windermere on the high plateau, so ensure you have appropriate wind and rain protection. And if you fancy a swim, have a refreshing dip in the chilly Lake Windermere. At the end of the day, you'll reach Windermere Hut, which sleeps about 16 people. There's also tent platforms, which is what I opted for. Day 3 takes you from Lake Windermere to Pelion, which is 8.6 kilometres. The day begins with a trek across buttongrass plains, followed by some steeper forested sections. You'll then descend through beautiful rainforest to Frog Flats, crossing Pelion Creek and the Forth River. The trail then climbs through dense forests for about 1.5 kilometres before levelling out. The vegetation transitions from rainforest to open eucalyptus as you approach Pelion Plains. The main side hike on this section is to summit Mount Oakleigh, which is only available once you have reached the Pelion Hut. This was a great climb with fantastic views of the glacial carved valleys and the surrounding area. Another summit option is Mount Pelion West, which I attempted. However, I strongly would recommend against it, as the trail is severely overgrown and I found that it disappeared 3/4 of the way up. Your destination for the night, Pelion Huts, offers roomy accommodation, space for camping, and fantastic views of Mount Oakleigh's dolerite spires. Day 4 of the Overland Track involves hiking from Pelion Hut to Kia Ora Hut, covering a distance of 8.6 kilometres. The day starts with 1.5k of fairly flat walking through tight forest. A steep ascent follows, climbing 200 metres over 2.5 kilometres to reach Pelion Gap. It's at Pelion Gap where you have the option to summit Mount Ossa, Tasmania's highest peak, sitting at 1,617 metres tall, which adds an extra 9 kilometres onto the day. This was a challenging but rewarding peak. Expect a bit of scrambling and fantastic views at the top. There's also the option to summit Mount Pelion East, though I didn't choose to do this. Your destination for day 4, Kia Ora Hut, is a notable stop on the hike. Located in a picturesque valley, the hut offers spectacular views of surrounding mountains, including Cathedral Mountain, Falling Mountain, and Mount Massif. Kia Ora Hut has a sleeping capacity of 34 people and 9 tent platforms. Day 5, Kia Ora to Windy Ridge, 9.6 kilometres. This section of the track is generally considered less challenging compared to previous days, with relatively flat terrain and fewer steep climbs. The highlight of day 5 is visiting Hartnett Falls, a beautiful waterfall accessible via a short side trip which adds an extra 3 to 4 kilometres onto the day. Finish the day at Boatnickel's Hut, commonly known as Windy Ridge Hut. Located at the top of the Narcissus Valley, the hut offers dramatic views of the Duquesne Range and offers multiple sleeping bunks and tent platforms. In my opinion, day 5 is much less exciting than the previous days, with no summits to climb and less dramatic scenery than the previous few sections. Day 6 of the Overland Track in Tasmania is typically the final day of the hike, covering approximately 9 kilometres from Windy Ridge Hut to Narcissus Hut. This day is often considered the easiest of the trek, with mostly downhill or flat terrain through eucalypt forest, as you make your way towards Lake St. Clair. At the end of the trail, hikers arrive at Narcissus Hut, located at the northern end of Lake St. Clair. From here, most people take a ferry across the lake to the visitor centre at Cynthia Bay, marking the end of their Overland Track journey. For those with extra time and energy, there's an option to extend the hike by walking an additional 15 kilometres along the shore of Lake St. Clair to the visitor centre. I had multiple people tell me the section is quite monotonous and repetitive, so I opted to skip it and opted to get the ferry instead. At the end of the trail at Cynthia Bay Visitor Centre, the small crew of people I had met on the trail and I celebrated with a burger and coffee. The fantastic team at Overland Track Transport were awaiting me and some of the other hikers at Lake St Clair, and took me direct to Launceston Airport, where I flew back to Sydney that afternoon. Overall, the Overland Track offers an unforgettable experience characterised by stunning landscapes, rich biodiversity and a well-maintained trail. It caters to a wide range of hikers, from beginners looking for an introduction to multi-day trekking to seasoned adventurers seeking a scenic challenge with the option to tackle many optional summits. Thankfully, Tasmania Parks limits the amount of people on the trail at any one time, meaning it doesn't feel heavily trafficked. With that said, it definitely doesn't feel wild or as close to remote as say the Skye Trail in Scotland. Wild camping is also forbidden, and thus you're forced to sleep where everyone else sleeps, meaning if you prefer not to have company, this hike might not be for you. For me, this hike was a nice mix of incredible natural beauty, solo hiking, and also spending time with new friends I made on the trail at the huts. I think this trek is a must-do for anyone visiting Tasmania who wants to experience its natural beauty. Costs. So hiking the Overland Track isn't the most affordable hike you can do, especially for Australia. These are the following costs that I paid to hike the trail. Trail fee, 295 AUD. Overland Track Transport, 85 AUD each way, so $170 total. Launceston accommodation, I stayed at the Pod Inn, which was a fantastic pod hostel, 75 AUD for one night. Return flights from Sydney to Launceston, $200 AUD total. Food, about $20 to $30 per day on the trail. In total, that's $920, which I think is pretty steep for a through hike. I do think you get what you pay for here though, as the trail is very well maintained, and as I mentioned before, Tasmania Parks limits the amount of people on the trail at any one time. The huts are also very nice and well maintained, and offer a refuge in the case of poor weather. Though, for me, I prefer to camp, so they weren't too much of a selling point. And guys, that's pretty much it. That is my summary of the Overland hike in Tasmania. If you have any questions, drop a comment below, or I'd really appreciate a like. Thanks for watching again, guys, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.